Hey there and welcome back. We're diving deep into something pretty weighty today, the whole intersection of religion, social justice, and the American left.
Oh, yeah, definitely a topic with some layers to it.
We'll be using David Horowitz's Dark Agenda as our
Okay.
main source, pulling out some of the, well, most thought-provoking bits. Ready to unpack all this?
Absolutely. Should be a fascinating conversation.
Okay, so Horowitz, right off the bat, points out this tension between, like, leftist ideology and religion. Goes way back, even to the French Revolution.
Right, right. I mean, think about it, renaming Notre Dame the Temple of Reason. That was a statement.
No kidding. But it's more than just symbolic, right? I mean, look what happened in the Vendée region.
Oh, absolutely. Tragic. Thousands of Catholics massacred. It's a dark reminder that when you try to erase faith, things can get brutal fast.
Yeah, a real chilling thought. And it didn't end there, did it? Horowitz argues that anti-religious sentiment continued, especially under those 20th century communist regimes.
You're exactly right. The numbers are staggering. Over 95,000 Russian Orthodox priests executed between 1917 and 1935 just for being priests.
Like, we hear so much about religious violence, but often those criticizing it, they overlook the atrocities committed by regimes that outright rejected religion.
Yeah, good point. And even today in America, you have figures like Bill Maher calling for, well, the death of religion.
Yeah, his documentary, Religulous, really tried to paint religious folks as, well, foolish.
Didn't pull any punches, that's for sure. And some of those interview tactics felt a bit manipulative, to be honest. Like, is genuine dialogue even possible when one side is so set on portraying the other as, completely irrational?
Yeah, it makes you wonder. It's like in some circles, faith automatically equals ignorance.
Hmm.
And that brings us to, well, another big name in the new atheist crowd, Richard Dawkins. His book, The God Delusion, pretty much says believing in God is, well, irrational in light of science.
Right. His whole argument rests on science disproving God. But Horowitz pushes back on that. Plenty of scientists are religious, see no conflict there.
It's true. Some of the biggest scientific minds were deeply religious.
Exactly. And it seems like Dawkins gets hung up on literal interpretations of religious texts. He might be missing those deeper moral and spiritual aspects that, well, actually matter to believers.
That's a great point. It reminds me of Blaise Pascal, that 17th century philosopher, mathematician, and, deeply religious guy.
Ah, Pascal, fascinating figure.
His wager is so interesting, basically saying believing in God is rational, even if you can't prove his existence.
It's about those potential consequences, right? Both in this life and, well, maybe beyond.
Exactly. And Pascal's life was full of compassion, service to others, grappling with big questions about suffering and meaning. Such a contrast to, well, the sometimes harsh tone of some new atheists towards believers.
Yeah, there's a real difference in approach there.
Okay, so we've got this, well, sometimes messy relationship between leftist ideology and religion. Now let's zoom in on America. Founded on religious freedom, but Horowitz argues that freedom is under pressure, especially from the left.
You're hitting on a key point. We have to remember the context. America's a secular republic, no official state religion. But a lot of the founders were fleeing religious persecution.
Right, the Pilgrims, the Mayflower Compact, their Protestant beliefs were a huge part of why they wanted religious freedom.
Exactly. They saw a secular government as the protector of that freedom, not a way to wipe out religion from public life. That's a crucial distinction.
Which brings up a really interesting question for, well, everyone listening. What does religious freedom mean to you today? Is it just about worshiping how you please or something bigger?
That's a big one. And it's something we have to think about, especially as the boundaries of religious expression, particularly in places like schools, get debated. And that leads us to a landmark case, Engel v. Vitale in 1962.
The case that banned school-sponsored prayer. Huge controversy. And Horowitz argues it was a turning point in efforts to, well, push religion out of public spaces.
The court's reasoning was the separation of church and state, First Amendment stuff. Government shouldn't endorse a specific religion. But there were, well, some big unintended consequences.
Yeah, like now, any mention of religion in schools is practically taboo. And Horowitz argues it went beyond just school prayer. It became a wider crackdown on religious expression.
He points to cases like Wallace v. Jaffrey, Lee v. Wiseman, more restrictions on religion in the classroom. He sees these as, well, a shift in how we understand the First Amendment, like from protecting religious freedom to actively suppressing it.
And here's where things get interesting, maybe even a little ironic. Horowitz notes that as Christian prayer was getting removed, some schools were introducing Islamic teachings and practices, and there wasn't the same level of opposition.
It does make you think, is it really about neutrality or is it about favoring some belief systems over others?
Big questions for sure. We'll keep wrestling with those. But first, we have to talk about someone who was instrumental in removing prayer from schools, Madalyn Murray O'Hair.
O'Hare, what a character. A staunch atheist, spent her life fighting what she saw as, well, religion's overreach in America.
Her legal battles, especially Murray v. Curlett, which basically ended Bible readings in schools, had a huge impact. But her story's about more than just legal wins. Her personal life was, well, pretty wild, lots of family drama, and she really disliked traditional America, the whole religious foundation of it. Even wanted to defect to the Soviet Union at one point.
Yeah, no shortage of strong opinions there. Tearing up a Bible on Phil Donahue's show, definitely a polarizing figure. But you can't deny, her activism fed into that growing culture war between secularists and religious conservatives.
And that war is still raging today, shaping how we talk about, well, pretty much everything.
Absolutely. We're seeing the effects in politics, social issues, you name it. This tension is deeply woven into the fabric of American society. It's like O'Hare's activism lit a fuse, right? This huge conflict, way bigger than just schools, right at the heart of America. Two totally different views of, well, everything. Morality, justice, the place of faith in public life, the whole nine yards.
And it gets really obvious when you look at something like, well, abortion. That's where religion and this idea of social justice, they really clash.
No doubt about it. Horowitz makes the case that the left's approach to social justice, well, it often bumps right into the church's teachings, especially on the whole sanctity of life thing.
Okay, so break it down for us. How is the church's idea of social justice different from what we hear from, the left?
Big difference is individual responsibility. The church, they see every person as having inherent dignity no matter what. You got to love your neighbor, work for a better world, but you also got to focus on being good, making good choices, striving for holiness, all that.
So it's not just about changing laws or systems, but changing yourself, too.
You got it. Real social justice. It can't just come from government programs or protests. It has to come from inside, from living out those gospel values every day.
And so how does abortion fit into all this whole culture of life thing? Where does that come in?
Well, the church is against abortion, plain and simple. They believe life is sacred from the moment of conception. It's this core belief that every human being, even in the womb, is made in God's image and has dignity, has worth.
So that's the culture of life. Seeing all human life as connected and rejecting anything that, well, devalues or disregards the vulnerable, especially the unborn.
That's it. Culture of life covers a lot of ground, from abortion to euthanasia to poverty, war, all of it. It's about creating a society that protects all human life, those who need it most.
And that puts the church at odds with, well, a lot of folks on the left, especially on the abortion rights issue.
Yeah, it's a definite conflict zone. Many on the left see abortion access as a fundamental right, like crucial for women's equality, for them to control their own bodies and make their own choices about their reproductive lives.
But the church says that right doesn't include ending the life of a, unborn child.
Exactly. For the church, abortion is taking an innocent human life, a serious moral wrong. They argue that the unborn child has a right to life that we all have to protect. So it's this clash, the right to choose versus the right to life.
A real clash of values, and one that's been playing out in America for, well, generations now. Big questions, too. Whose rights matter more? What makes a society just? How do you balance personal freedom with protecting the most vulnerable?
Not easy questions, that's for sure. Been fueling the culture wars for decades.
And a lot of these battles play out in the courts. Horowitz talks about a bunch of Supreme Court cases that have shaped religious freedom in America.
One that stands out is Griswold v. Connecticut back in 1965, a law banning married couples from using contraceptives. The court struck it down, said it violated a right to privacy that's implied in the Constitution.
And that right to privacy, that paved the way for Roe v. Wade in '73, legalizing abortion nationwide.
Man, Roe v. Wade is still one of the most controversial decisions the court has ever made. Got everyone fired up, and it's still shaping things today.
It's really something, and kind of sad, that Norma McCorvey, the Jane Roe in the case, she later became a vocal opponent of abortion, said she regretted her part in legalizing it.
It's a twist, isn't it? Makes you think about the personal stories behind these big issues, those moral struggles people go through.
And Roe v. Wade really shook up politics, too. You saw the rise of the religious right, groups like Jerry Falwell's Moral Majority.
It's like conservative Christians saw it as a total attack on traditional values, on the sanctity of life. They became a powerful force pushing back against that whole left-wing social agenda.
And it seems like it goes beyond just abortion. You saw it in the fight over the Equal Rights Amendment, too.
Definitely. The ERA, trying to make sure everyone had equal rights, regardless of sex, got some pushback from, well, conservative women, many of them religious.
They were worried it would undermine families, lead to problems for women, like in child custody cases or alimony payments.
Yeah, that debate, it really threw fuel on the culture wars. It showed how divided we are on things like, well, what is equality? What's a family supposed to look like? How do you balance individual rights and, what society expects?
And it feels like these cultural wars have only gotten worse, right? Partly because of identity politics and the whole new atheist movement getting more influential.
You're right on the money there. Identity politics, it's all about group identity, who's got power, who doesn't. It's created a deeper split between the secular left and, well, those religious conservatives.
So instead of focusing on each person and what they do, it's all about what group you belong to and whether you're oppressed or not.
Exactly. It's a way of looking at the world that says all the problems are because of, well, systemic oppression. It kind of downplays the whole idea of personal choice, personal responsibility, the things the church emphasizes, like sin and redemption, being good.
And the new atheists, with all their attacks on religion, they haven't exactly brought people together, have they?
No, that way of talking, it often sounds pretty condescending, dismissive. Makes people who believe in God feel resentful.
It's like they've just replaced one kind of rigid belief with another. Now it's faith in reason and science instead of faith in God.
And the funny thing is, they say religion is the root of all evil. But they forget all the good things that have been done in the name of faith. And they don't talk much about the terrible things done by regimes that rejected religion, like those communist states we talked about.
Makes you wonder, why are they so against religion? Is it just about reason and science, or is there something else going on?
For some, I think it's about power, plain and simple. Replacing the old authorities, like religion, with their own secular ideas. And they can be pretty aggressive about it.
Horowitz gives some, well, pretty unsettling examples, especially when it comes to getting rid of any sign of religion from public spaces.
It's crazy, right? Some schools went to extreme lengths to take out even the smallest mention of religion from textbooks. Everything, like they're trying to rewrite history, erase the fact that faith had a huge impact on Western civilization.
It's like they're trying to shut down anyone who disagrees with their secular worldview.
You got it. And it's not just schools. Horowitz talks about all kinds of cases where government officials targeted religious people and organizations, often saying they were just trying to promote equality or stop discrimination.
Yeah, Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, that's a good example. The rule that employers had to cover contraception, sterilization, even those abortion-inducing drugs. That caused a big uproar, especially among religious groups.
Especially for the Little Sisters of the Poor, those Catholic nuns who take care of the elderly poor. They felt like that rule went against their deepest beliefs.
Their case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, showed that tension between religious freedom and those government mandates. Made people ask, how far can the government go? Do people and organizations have the right to follow their conscience?
The Little Sisters, they represent this bigger worry that under the name of social justice, the government is stepping on religious freedom, making people choose between the law and their conscience.
That's a choice nobody should have to make in a country that was founded on, religious liberty.
You said it. We have to protect that basic right, not just for religious folks, but for everyone. When one group loses their freedom, it's a threat to everyone's freedom.
It's true. Religious freedom isn't just about protecting those who believe. It's about protecting the whole idea of a free and diverse society.
Exactly. And that brings us back to where we started. How do we make sense of all this? Religion, social justice, the American left, how do they fit together? How do we stand up for religious freedom and still work for a fair and just society?
These are the questions, right? The tough ones that we as a country need to grapple with. No easy answers. But one thing's for sure. We got to move past all this us versus them stuff and actually talk to each other, try to find some common ground, even when we disagree, sometimes on really big things.
I'm right there with you. It's not just about ideas. It's about people, about winning hearts and minds. And to do that, we got to listen, show respect, even when we hear things that we really don't like.
It's like we're trying to walk this tightrope, huh? Balancing religious freedom and social justice, especially how it plays out on the left.
Yeah, it's a balancing act, and not just in this deep dive, but for America as a whole right now, wouldn't you say?
So as we wrap up, is there even a hope of, finding common ground? Or are we stuck in this fight forever?
I'm an optimist. I think there's always hope. Even when things seem really divided, but it takes a different way of looking at things. We got to get past this us versus them idea that, well, it's kind of taken over our politics.
Yeah, that's easy to fall into, especially when you feel like what you believe in is under attack.
No doubt. But to find that common ground, we got to start by, remembering everyone's human, even the folks we disagree with. Those who have ideas we think are, well, just plain wrong. They're still Americans. They still deserve respect.
That can be tough. Yeah. Especially when you see people acting in ways that seem hateful, intolerant, all that.
It is tough, but it's super important. If we just write off anyone who thinks differently as, like, evil, then we can't even understand them, let alone change their minds. All you're left with is silence or fighting.
So how do we get out of this cycle? All this anger, division, where do we go from here?
It starts with realizing this isn't just about ideas, it's about people's hearts and minds. And if you want to change hearts and minds, you got to lead with empathy, with respect, even when you hear things that, well, might offend you.
It's like we need to, I don't know, relearn how to have a conversation, a civil one. Disagree without, like, demonizing each other. Have a real debate without all the personal attacks, the name-calling.
Exactly. And that goes for both sides. It's easy to point fingers, say the other guys are intolerant or closed-minded, but we all got to look in the mirror, ask ourselves, am I really open to hearing different points of view? Even if it makes me uncomfortable, am I willing to listen and talk it out?
Those are good questions, hard questions. But if we want to move forward as a country, I think we have to ask them.
Couldn't agree more. And remember, not everyone on the left is, extreme. Plenty of people on the left care about social justice and religious freedom. They see those two things as working together, not against each other, to make a better society.
So how do we find those people? How do we build bridges with them?
I think it starts with shared values. Yeah, we've got our differences, but most Americans, they want the same things. Dignity, compassion, fairness. We might disagree on how to get there, but wanting those things, that's a place to start talking.
And maybe, just maybe, if we focus on what we have in common, we can start to see each other not as, like, the enemy, but as, I don't know, fellow Americans, all trying to make things better, even if we don't always agree on the way to do it.
That's the spirit. And let's not forget, things don't always change overnight. We're going to have setbacks, tough times, but we got to keep aiming for that goal. Living together peacefully, respecting each other's right to believe, even when we don't see eye to eye.
That's a powerful thought. It gives me, I don't know, a bit of hope, because things can feel pretty dark right now, politically speaking.
And it's a thought that's, like, built into America's DNA, right? This whole idea of pluralism, people of all different faiths, beliefs, living together, getting along. Sure, we haven't always lived up to that, but it's a good goal, something to shoot for. It's a way to build a society that's more just, more compassionate for everyone.
So as we close out this deep dive, what's the one thing you want folks to walk away with?
Don't give up on talking to each other. Don't let those loud, extreme voices shut down the reasonable ones, the people of goodwill. Listen, learn, talk to people who think differently than you. It's not easy, but it's how we build a society where religious freedom and social justice can both thrive.
That's a great message, something we all need to hear, I think. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Hope it got you thinking, maybe even inspired you to have those tough conversations about faith, freedom, what kind of society we want to build.